That was the Prime Minister and the European Union President Ursula von der Leyen there, joining what she calls Canada's carbon pricing challenge at a big summit in Newfoundland today between Canada and the European Union. An announcement that comes as global carbon pricing has been a hot issue in our country for months now. And Justin Trudeau today with more criticism of Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre and his decision to vote against an updated Ukraine free trade deal over carbon tax language in that deal. Here to dig back into carbon price politics is our Friday front bench. Let's bring him in. Sabrina Grover was a federal Liberal candidate in the 2021 election in Calgary. She's now a principal at Shakti Strategies. Larissa Waller from GT & Company previously served as the head of communications for Ontario's Conservative Premier Doug Ford. Happy to have her with us. Former Ontario NDP MPP, there he is, Guratan Singh, now the vice president of Crestview Strategies, also the brother of NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. And our very own senior digital parliamentary reporter here at CTV News in Ottawa, Rachel Aiello. Great to have all of you with us. So what do we think here? Sabrina, let me start with you. Who's winning the battle in the court of public opinion right now over this?
I think this week was a really good week for the Prime Minister, and today in particular, the announcement and the press conference that he had with the EU leaders was excellent. I think it reaffirms the position that the Liberals and the government has taken on not only carbon pricing, but generally the move towards a low carbon economy, towards clean energy. It's paying us back, right? So joining the New Horizon deal with Europe has been really positive today. There was a lot of other reaffirmations from Ursula on some of the positive things that they've seen in terms of carbon pricing and in terms of the ways in which European nations and Canada are going to play together in preserving a low carbon or moving forward a low carbon economy. I think in contrast, it was a rough week for the leader of the opposition. Pierre, I think, looked very unserious in the past week as a leader, citing this carbon pricing issue as a way to not sign the free trade deal with Ukraine, which the Ukrainians themselves said that they agreed to. So I think on this week, the Liberals have certainly come out on top when it comes to the narrative on whether or not carbon pricing and this approach to the environment is working.
Larissa, I got a sense you may disagree. What do you think?
On what part? I mean, I disagree with most of it. I'll start with, I think it was a good week for the Prime Minister. If you're a Prime Minister that wants to double down on the carbon tax, then you had a great week, because that's exactly what he did. And he doubled down with other world leaders who also believe in a carbon tax. Again, with the carbon tax, it works on paper if you have the political, I'll say courage, but I don't even mean that in a positive sense, but the political courage to see it through, which means to keep taxing, and raise the price of goods so that you are forced to change your behavior. That's what the carbon tax does. In terms of the Ukrainian free trade deal, I don't understand why they put it in there. At first, the Liberals said there is no reference to carbon tax. And then you say, in Section 13, it's right there. It says promote carbon pricing. And then the Liberals said, oh, but that's not enforceable. So why would you put that in there? Why would you put in reference to promoting carbon pricing with a country that is at war right now, that is facing hundreds of billions of dollars of infrastructure building over the next decade? And Ukraine's carbon pricing scheme is very, very, very different than Canada's. So why would the Prime Minister virtue signal by wanting to impose a Canadian carbon pricing scheme on Ukraine right now? To me, that's playing dirty politics. And the Conservatives, by flagging that, to me, that's their responsibility as the opposition.
To Guratan Singh, and Guratan, we've been talking on this show on Fridays about this for weeks now. Now the Ukrainians are involved. What do you think?
I think the real dirty politics are the fact that Pierre Poilievre refuses to have any action on climate change and now is politicizing something that's really non-contentious everywhere outside of the Conservative caucus. The Ukrainian government, my understanding, has had some degree of carbon pricing since 2011. For them to enter Europe, they need some degree of a carbon price policy to enter Europe. This is not a contentious issue except for Pierre Poilievre, who is so ideological on something that is not founded in science, who is so willing to put his political agenda ahead of global security and ahead of Canada and Ukraine building a strong relationship together. It's been a terrible week for the leader of the opposition. I think the word that comes to mind more than anything is unprime ministerial. especially on the global stage.
Rachel Aiello, your view from Ottawa, covering these stories every day, the tying to Ukraine, winter is coming, doubling down on the carbon tax for the Prime Minister as well. The Europeans now on board.
Yeah, I think the Liberals feel like they've definitely found a winning issue here, Todd. They really doubled down on this week, hearing today from the Prime Minister as well. I think it is important to remember in this conversation some facts. You know, Ukraine has signed this deal. Actually, Zelensky signed it here in Ottawa next to the Prime Minister. So the insinuation that somehow this is forcing a carbon tax down their throat is a bit disingenuous. The wording is aspirational, as one government official described it at committee earlier this month. But I do think this was one of those instances where if you're explaining, you're losing. It's one of those situations where, quite plainly, Canadians can see what is and isn't in this deal and are able to acknowledge that both sides have agreed to enter it and what it does and does not do. And so I'm not sure that, although I can understand why Poilievre has taken this approach, I'm not sure that this is his best argument when it comes to the carbon tax.
Hey, back to you, Larissa. Winter coming, heating bills will go up. Opportunity for Conservatives to push this issue. What do you think?
So, the carbon tax in Canada and the carbon tax in Ukraine are two very different things. The carbon tax or the carbon pricing scheme in Ukraine is $2 on a ton over 500,000 tons. In Canada, we're going to have $170 per ton by 2030. So you cannot equate the two. You're also asking a country to sign a free trade agreement while they are dependent on us for aid, right? So you've asked them to sign a free trade agreement where carbon pricing means two different things to two different countries while we are giving them aid and they are in the middle of a war. So I don't think that that was a fair position. And I don't think it's fair to say that the Conservatives are the only ones playing politics when it was the Liberal cabinet that asked for this term to be included. They wanted those words in there. This is the first free trade agreement to have any reference to carbon pricing, and they chose the free trade agreement with Ukraine to do it. And if the free trade agreement doesn't pass, which it will, the other three parties will vote for it, and it's already signed. But if it did not pass, the existing free trade agreement that was brought in by the Conservatives would remain in place.
Sabrina, are you worried from a Liberal point of view that things are going to start to get a lot colder in this country and people are going to notice their bills going up, and we're going to hear from the Conservatives, axe the tax, and on it goes?
I mean, I think that the Conservative position continues to be unserious on the global stage, both when it comes to foreign policy and when it comes to climate change, right? So it's confusing that the Conservatives continue to push back on this deal with the Ukraine. As Grattan mentioned, Ukraine wants some of this carbon pricing pieces to get into the EU. Zelensky signed this deal. We're not forcing anything down anyone's throats. This has been a mutual cooperation. And so when it comes to looking unserious, I think not only have the Conservatives shown an inability to come to the table with any sort of effective climate plan, and that includes a climate plan that relates to the economy. I mean, the deal we saw today between Canada and the EU is significant for Canadian scientists. It's significant for research, for innovation, for the Canadian economy. And I think that the Conservatives continue to leave Canadians out in the cold when it comes to what their plan is for our future.